Hello, my friends. It's so good to see all of you here on the channel. For those of you who have never been to the channel, welcome to the channel. The channel is Ursula Bielski's World of Supernatural. My name is Ursula Bielski. I am a almost 35-year paranormal researcher. I'm also an historian and a folklorist. And I have been involved in the paranormal for a very long time. In the last several years, however, I have moved away from paranormal investigation, especially at very actively negative sites. And that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about tonight. A place that I have done a lot of research on, a place that I know a lot about, and a place that I have seen the effects of firsthand in very painful ways over the last few years. So I wanted to talk to you about this location tonight because I've seen some very disturbing developments there, and I want to help you to avoid getting involved with this place and experiencing any fallout from this place, because it is a very diabolical place, a demonic place, and it's one of the few places that I have recognized something that the Catholic Church calls infestation, which is the infestation of a location rather than a person by demonic entities. This is something that we have talked about already on this show, This Present Darkness, which looks at the reality of evil in our world and the reality of supernatural functioning in our relationships and in different locations and in people. So a good topic for our show tonight. Now, the place in question is Joliet Prison. This is old Joliet Prison in Joliet, Illinois, southwest of Chicago. I wrote a book about the prison and the haunting of the prison a couple of years ago now, called The Haunting of Joliet Prison. It's a thick book, as you can see. And I wrote it with the Joliet Hauntings crew, which was a team of people that I assembled to put together to do a series of investigations at the prison in order to put together a ghost tour for the prison. Now, the prison has been closed since 2002. And let me just point out right away to make this distinction, because even when I started my research, I wasn't aware of this. There are two penitentiaries in the Joliet area. They're both referred to as Joliet Prison or Joliet Penitentiary. They're both referred to as Stateville or Statesville erroneously. But they're two different prisons. The older prison is the old Joliet Prison, or the Joliet State Penitentiary. This is the prison that's on the big limestone prison that you see in the Blues Brothers in the opening scene. And this is on Collins Avenue, which is actually a part of an extension of Archer Avenue, Route 171. This is an ancient Indian road. I talk about this in the book, about how this was situated on what I believe is a ley line or an energy line in the landscape. Also, on limestone, this is also something that we believe is conducive to haunting activity, paranormal manifestations. So I talk a lot about how in the book, this is a perfect place for this, haunted prison to be, because of a lot of the geographical things that are involved there. But what happened was that in 2018, the prison started to do tours. And the first tours were just history tours that they started, I believe, in the spring. And then later in the year, later on the summer, they thought about doing ghost tours, doing a ghost tour, which, if you probably know, if you're into the paranormal, is something that's done at a lot of prisons across the United States. It's a big money-making venture to open up these old prisons for ghost tours and also paranormal investigations, where groups of ghost hunters can come in and spend the night, paying usually a lot of money for the ability to do this, to be at the property by themselves all night to investigate. So this was something that they'd actually met with, and when I say they, I mean the Joliet Historical Museum, who is kind of like the manager of the events at the prison. The state of Illinois owns the prison, and it leases the prison to the city of Joliet each year to host these events. And there's fundraisers that are done there to try and get money to restore the buildings and things like that. The building is in great disrepair. There's been no heat or electricity there since 2002. And so the damage from the environment has been very swift and very intense. The old Joliet prison is differentiated from the Stateville prison, which is actually in a nearby town. It's actually not actually in Joliet, but a lot of people confuse these, and I did too. And it was very difficult to do the research for the book because even newspaper reporters over the years confused the two prisons or lopped them together. And that was largely, I think, because the two prisons had the same warden for a number of years. And of course, they're, in the same area. So it's very unusual to have these two penitentiaries right next to each other. But that's because Old Joliet Prison, which was completed or begun in the mid to late 1850s, was slated to be closed already by like the 1920s. There were deplorable conditions that were going on there. It had a terrible reputation for treatment of its prisoners. It was a dark, dangerous place where many prisoners had already died from tuberculosis and other diseases, and also from inmate on inmate violence and violence between inmates and guards, etc. So it had a horrific reputation, and it was slated to be closed down already by the 1920s. And this kind of talk of closing it continued for many years, but it stayed open until 2022. So both of these prisons continued to operate throughout the 20th century and into the 21st century, again, until 2002, when Old Joliet Prison was shut down. So again, keep in mind that this is the Old Joliet Prison, not the Stateville Penitentiary, which is not a part of the Old Joliet Prison. The other thing to keep in mind about the Old Joliet Prison is that after it started to be, kind of a main penitentiary, for the first decades of the prison's operation until the 1920s, when Stateville Penitentiary was opened, this was the only prison in Illinois, the only penitentiary in Illinois. So if you committed a crime that sent you to the penitentiary in Illinois, you were at Old Joliet Prison. And this is why it got such a terrible reputation early on, because all the gangsters were there, they're going back to the Victorian era, serial killers like Dr. Cream was held there for a while before he went on to commit more murders in London. The two men who attempted to steal the body of President Lincoln down in Springfield were incarcerated at Joliet Prison. There were so many murderers that were incarcerated here, rapists, thieves, on and on and on. So this was the place that you went to if you were convicted to a penitentiary in Illinois up and from, the 1850s until into the 1920s, when these other penitentiaries began to open. And there was a women's prison right across the street. The building is still there. So if you were a woman and you were sent to the penitentiary during this time period, before Dwight Penitentiary was opened just for women, women all went to the Old Joliet Prison. And in the beginning, they were actually incarcerated with the men at the main prison. And there were actually, their children were sometimes with them. They were allowed to have their children with them. So we did have children at the old prison. Okay, so what happens in 2018 is that the museum decides that they want to try to put a ghost tour together. At that time, as you may know, if you were my friend personally or my friend on Facebook, you know that my mom passed away in the summer of 2018. And it was not only very difficult because she had a bad fall a year before. She was completely incapacitated for that whole almost year. My husband and I were her caregivers, and we had a lot of difficulty with my sibling who had the power of attorney for her health and everything. And it was awful. It was a horrible situation. The situation got worse after her death in August of 2018. As you probably also know, if you were friends with me on Facebook or friends with me personally, that we got into a whole estate thing with my sibling, and it went on for a year. So it was a very difficult time. But someone sent me a link right at that time that Joliet Prison was looking for either an individual or preferably a business that could not only design a ghost tour for Joliet Prison, but also staff the tour and sell the tickets for the tour. So ideally, they were looking for a company, a tour company that had the knowledge, the resources, the staff, and the platform, the ticketing platform to set this up right away and for that year, for that fall. And this was in August. So I thought, I'm in this, I was really struggling because of my mom and everything, but I was like, there's nobody but us to do this, right? When I was still running Chicago Hauntings here in Chicago, we had run the tours for 19 years. We still tons of thousands of tickets every year. And I had all of these wonderful tour guides and associates, colleagues that not only wanted to be a part of this and wanted to do research at the prison, wanted to investigate the prison, but also already knew a lot about the prison because they had a personal interest in it going up until that time. So a lot of these people that I brought in already had a passion for the prison when we got in there. So it was really amazing. So I very quickly put together this team. I wrote up a whole list of the people that could be involved in leading the tours. And these were everyone from our own tour guides in Chicago that had worked with us for years to associates that I had in history research and paranormal investigation research, really qualified people. And I had a bio of each one of them that I included in our proposal. I included the fact that we were able to sell large numbers of tickets on our existing platform. We could staff all these tours. We come in and investigate. We wanted to come in and investigate on several nights so that we could find out what the situation was at the prison, who was haunting the prison, what the stories were, do the research to find out what these entities might be that we're assuming we were going to find there. And so it was great. My husband went out with me that first day. We were called right away as one. I was told we were one of only 2 people that were considered to do this. They chose us. And my husband and I went out to tour the prison on a very hot day. And we were with the director of the museum and with someone from the city of Joliet. And we had a wonderful tour. I actually got pushed on the staircase in the hospital during that tour. And so it was exciting. And it was so exciting to be in this place that as an investigator, I'd wanted to be in for so many years. And to be the first one to be allowed to do something like this, it was a real honor. And everyone was so excited that was going to be a part of this. So we went in several nights and the team did a number of investigations. We were allowed to be in only a few buildings because of the extensive and dangerous damage to a lot of the buildings in the prison. So, the main building, the cell blocks and the warden's quarters were actually off limits for the tours, but we were allowed to be in the hospital building. We were allowed to be in the gymnasium next to the hospital. We were allowed to be in the solitary cell house, solitary confinement with death row upstairs. This was where the first electric chair was housed in the state of Illinois. And then there were other areas that outside that proved to be very active, including the area around the old payphones and the area of the basketball courts, where a lot of activity occurred during the course of almost every evening, we would come to find out. So these wonderful investigations were done with our team, and we put this, and I had some history of the prison from the director of the museum, but really delved into everything, not only at the Chicago History Museum and Historical Society, on all kinds of online archives that I've been involved with, other independent researchers in the county that had done work there and outside of the county, down in Springfield, the Illinois State Archives. So this is really a passionate project and really a labor of love. You guys know me, anything I do, it ends up like that, right? So, and it was not only just me, but everyone else that was involved too, that was doing their own research and bringing their own expertise to this project. So we launched the tours that fall, and it was every night of the week. And then on Fridays and Saturdays, there would be an early tour, haunted history tour. And then later in the evening, there would be a ghost hunt on Fridays and Saturdays that was led by our team, where people would actually use ghost hunting equipment and things like that throughout the tours. And they were a huge success. And we had sellouts every night. During the course of this, I thought, maybe we can raise a little extra money if we have some well-known medium or psychic come in for the evening, and you can investigate with this person, and then we can charge a lot more money and make some bonus money. Because all the money that we were making, it was a split between my company and the prison, or this fund for helping to restore the prison. I think it's something like $4 million that needs to be raised in order to make these buildings safe for habitation or for touring and other events use. So basically, after I sold the tickets, paid our tour guides and our investigation hosts each night, and paid, of marketing expenses we were doing, then we would split the difference. So we raised, I think, $15,000 in those 2 months for the prison. And that was great. And we had a contract for a few months. I think one thing was 3 months just for that season. And then we're going to talk about, what we're going to do after that. And I don't know what happened, but I was told that we were no longer needed after that initial season, but that we had done a great job. They were going to arrange for us to be able to come in with private groups, and I was told that that would be more beneficial for my company, for more financially beneficial for me and my company if we could bring our own private groups in. What they had done is that they had had a docent with our team every night of the tours and the investigations. And they said this was just, part of the policy that someone from, their administration, the organization had to be there when we were there. And so I guess it turned out that they learned everything that we had, all of our research and our investigations. They had learned about all the hauntings. And then we were basically told we were no longer needed. I found out that they had contacted the booking platform that we had used to sell the tickets and set up their own booking through that company. Coincidence? I don't know. And basically, yeah, I was told that we could bring in our own groups of people that wanted to investigate and do our own private investigations. And then no one ever spoke to me again. And I sent many emails, made phone calls. No one ever responded to me. No one ever I told them I had groups waiting to come in. They wouldn't let me bring groups. No one would answer my questions. And then I saw that other people were bringing groups in, including this medium that had been, I thought, a friend of mine going back many years here in Chicago. We had brought him in, paid him $1,000 to host, a special night to raise the money for the prison. And then I saw that the prison was allowing him to come in and do private events with people, but they weren't answering my requests to do this at all. It was weird. It was kind of evocative of something that had happened at Bachelor's Grove, which you guys know I've been very associated with over the years, wrote a long book about. And it was actually the same person who got permission to do private overnight ghost hunts there. And I had been waiting to do this, and the county knew that I was waiting for them to let me get a permit to do this for years. And they said they weren't issuing those permits at the time. And so when I saw that this other person was doing these events, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go get my permit now. And then the guy that's associated with Bachelor's Grove and has this goofy YouTube channel, who hates me so much, said I was butthurt about, someone else doing tours there at night. And so I had to get my own permit. And it's like, no, that's not what happened. I had been waiting to get a permit for a long time. And so maybe it was a little hurt that they didn't reach out to me and tell me, okay, you can get your permit now, but whatever, again, it's a situation where I did so much research and spent so much money doing research, memberships and archives and, all that kind of thing, all this stuff that I did on my own time, events that I gave there, on my own dime, and tours that I gave there that I paid for permits for that I didn't charge for. And I just felt like, I never got anything in return from the county. They never, had any relationship with me. They were never, a little extra nice to me, like at all, whatever, not butthurt, but, just whatever, you just think like you have a relationship with people after you do a lot. You expect to just have a little kindness in return, and there just isn't anything, but whatever. Same thing goes for people that you think are your friends for a long time and that know you're involved with a place and put your heart and your soul into a place, and they just come in and collect the money, when you're all done. Whatever, not to say that this person hadn't been there for a lot of years doing research, but I mean, when someone else is very closely involved and is supposed to be a friend of yours, which brings me to up until, what happened next. So I see that other people are being allowed to do events there. And, a lot of this came from the prison being on Ghost Adventures. And literally the first thing I did after we got the contract for the prison was to contact my friend, Jeff Belanger, who has been the writer and location scout for Ghost Adventures for years. And I told Jeff, we got Joliet prison. We're doing investigations there, putting together a tour there. So hopefully I've got a contact for you now. Maybe you can get the show in, because they had definitely wanted to go into the prison for many years, but it was not open to the public. So it took a while, and it wasn't until the next summer that Ghost Adventures came in. But, that was really proud of that was something that came of, that relationship that I had, that the prison, that Ghost Adventures came in. I'm not saying Ghost Adventures would have come in there anyway, but I'm just saying, whatever. So time goes by and I see that, that this other person is bringing tours in there that, that I had come in there to do this guest spot. And it really bothered me, it bothered me. And I contacted a mutual friend of ours that probably a lot of you guys know, who has had the radio show up in Minneapolis for many years. He's been at our ghost conferences many times. He was the host for our conferences for many years. And, so I'm really bothered by this because everyone knew, that on top of what happened with my mom and everything, that all the heart and soul and energy that I and a number of good friends had spent to put these tours together. Everyone knew that the prison's back was just turned on us, and we had done all this work, we had raised all this money, we were given no information about why we weren't allowed to come in there anymore. And then the permission was given to others that we had brought there. So I was very disturbed about this. I knew this other person was a good, friend of a mutual friend of ours, and we were on the phone for a half hour more talking about this. And he shared some other things that kind of lined up with what was going on with this person. So I was very shocked to discover earlier this year that he was doing events at the prison with the same person. So, I mean, I was like, I get nothing really surprises me anymore, I guess. And then I just found out there was some other stuff going on there too. But it was just, I don't know. I'm glad I'm away from all of this paradrama that's going on. I see friends falling apart left and right, people that have been together for so many years falling apart. And I don't believe that it's a coincidence that there is a connection to these places like Bachelor's Grove and Joliet prison, especially. I have seen terrible things happening with relationships and friendships between people since their involvement with the prison. And I see it as a great blessing to me that we were barred from coming back into the prison. I thank God every day that I didn't spend another moment at that prison and that I didn't bring any other people into that prison, on my watch. I'll tell you what happened to me personally. Some of you know this. If you're my friend, you definitely know this. If you have followed the channel, you know this. I'll tell you right now, people that don't know me, people that are not my friend or haven't been following the channel, they're going to say, oh, she's hurt because she isn't allowed in the prison anymore. And these other people are. No, that is not it at all. And again, if you're close to me, if you're my friend, if you've been following the channel, you know exactly why I am doing this program tonight, right now. And that is because I am gravely concerned about people being in that prison. What happened to me was that by the end of that year, which was then 2019, something very terrible had happened to me. And I now believe I was under the influence of what you might call negative energy if you're not a believer in God and Christ, but what I would call demonic. And it was interesting because at that time, I still had not made the break from exploring things in the paranormal and the supernatural that I would not touch with a 10-foot pole now. And what I had done was that I reached out to someone named Dr. Terrence Palmer, who passed away last year. And Terrence Palmer, I had known from being involved in the field of parapsychology. He is a parapsychologist from England who had worked for many years on something called spirit release therapy. And if you have studied spirit attachment at all, you're probably familiar with people like Dr. Edith Fiore and other colleagues of hers that were psychiatrists who began to believe that a lot of their patients were possessed by deceased spirits and also possibly by diabolical spirits, evil spirits, non-human entities. And a lot of work has been done in this field over the years, and a lot of work has come to be done in spirit release therapy, which is the process of freeing people from these attachments. And so I thought, what have I got to lose? I felt like I had really lost myself. And I thought maybe it had something to do with everything I had gone through with my mom and, the problems with the prison and things like that. And so I contacted Dr. Palmer, and the spirit release therapy, we did a whole episode about my spirit release therapy if you want to go watch it later. And what happened is the way it's done remotely. So you don't talk to the team that's doing the release therapy. It consists of a facilitator and a medium, and the facilitator kind of reminds the medium of all of the things to check for on the person that is going through the therapy. So they check for things like your chakras, and they check for parts of you that might have broken off from your soul or your spirit when you were younger because of some kind of trauma. They look for very dangerous or dark attachments and things like this. And then you get a whole transcript and a recording of the session afterwards. And what they supposedly found was that I had this very dark entity, a diabolical entity attached to me. And they said it had come because my heart had been completely broken recently. And I realized that had come from what I had gone through after my mom's death with my sibling over my mom's estate, where I had found out all these terrible things that had been going on in my family. I lost my mom's house and my inheritance. I lost my relationship with my sibling. So all of these terrible things, on top of losing my mom, and I had lost my other brother recently too. So I kind of lost my whole family. And so, yeah, I think that qualifies as a broken heart. And I came to learn later on, after I began to study demonology and exorcism, that a broken heart is one of the main portals for the demonic to enter our lives. When your reality is completely shattered, when your hopes are shattered, and when you put all your hopes in something besides God, and those hopes are shattered, whether it's a person, a relationship, something that you expect to happen, a job, whatever, that can be a powerful door opening to the paranormal. So this release therapy was done, and it was interesting because right before I did it, I had gone to the hospital to visit my aunt who had cancer, and she was dying, and she did die New Year's Eve that year. And later on, my cousin told me that she almost asked me to leave the hospital because there was something so off about me and so off-putting about me. Nothing in my behavior, any way that I was acting that she could put a finger on, but it was just something that was off. And she almost asked me to leave my aunt's hospital room. So I started to feel better after I had this release therapy done. They claimed that St. Michael had to come and remove this attachment. I do not recommend, I highly recommend against doing anything like this. As you probably know, if you watched the episode about it, I don't think anyone should be involved in these kinds of things, a spirit release therapy and things like this. The only people that you should be contacting if you think you have a problem with this is a priest. So at any rate, I came to really understand a lot of the things that were spiritually and supernaturally going on and that had gone on in my life. And I realized that a lot of this also started with my exposure to Joliet prison. Now, if you are familiar with what happened to us there while we were there, my dear friend Colleen, a medium who I've been really good friends with, she's like a sister to me for years, she got very sick. She was at the prison every single night. She was the team leader, the site manager, made sure everybody was on the tour route, nobody wandered off, and she led most of the tours. And she is the most wonderful people you would ever meet in your life. And she got very physically ill from mold being at the prison. I think it's a really bad place for people to be physically from all of the environmental concerns there. But she also had a lot of these terrible things happen in her life personally. And this stuff began to follow her home too. And there was an incident, notably, where there were footprints that were found in her house when no one had been there that looked like a large man's work boot. And this is something, if you saw my episode on the demon house and Gary, this was something that they were seeing in the house at the beginning of the manifestations in the Gary and Deanna house. It's something that has been seen in other cases of diabolical possession, where these footprints, either muddy or powdery footprints, are found in the home prior to the diagnosis of spirit possession. So this is very concerning. And this was something I found out happened to a number of people that came on the tours as well in the investigations. So it's very alarming. And again, in hindsight, I'm so grateful that I was barred from the prison and I was not allowed to bring anyone else in there. And I'm so glad I never exposed anyone else to what was going on there. So coming forward, these events at the prison have kept going on. And I was really alarmed the other day because as you probably know, I sold Chicago Hauntings in 2020 during the pandemic. It's business for us. It's been very difficult the last couple of years with my mom being sick. And I just kind of lost my footing with the business. There was a lot of competition from other companies that were starting, that were taking books and making their own tour routes. So there was a lot of other competition as well. So with the COVID too, it was just time. It was time for me to move on to something else. So I love the guy who's taken over the company, Mike Huberty. He operates ghost tours in many other cities across like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Puerto Rico, Hawaii. He and his sister Allison Dornlin are amazing. They're just really great researchers and tour leaders, and it's in really good hands. And I know that they're continuing to present the history of these locations. Really wanted to make sure that the stories of the dead were still being told, stories of the tragedies were still being told that are largely still ignored by the city. So I feel that's all really in good hands. And they also have a great blog that they took over my blog, and they're writing a great blog about history, ghost lore, not only in Chicago, but all over the place. And I get their emails with the new blog post. So I went to the blog to check it out the other day, and I was so alarmed to find that they're advertising these investigations at Joliet prison featuring these guys that I've just been talking about. And I was like, wow, this is just insane. And I was like, well, it's not my website anymore. So I don't, control like what ads go on there and stuff like that. 3 things made me feel I had to come on here and say something about it. That was one thing that I saw this ad, and the ad says something like, if I can find it really quickly, something about like, enter the gates of hell. Let me make sure that I have this right, because, I just want to tell you what's true. And it's all, like I said, this is all just for your protection, for your benefit. It's not to badmouth anybody. It's not to, say anything that's detrimental to anybody. It's not to hurt anybody's business or hurt anyone's career. It's really just to make sure that you guys are all protected. Not really seeing what I saw the other day on here as far as the blog, but yeah, essentially it's something like hell at Joliet prison. And I was just like, oh my God. Oh my God. Joliet prison being hell is not a figure of speech. It's not an entertainment catchphrase. It's not a hook, to get you to buy a ticket. This is for real. And I talk about it in the book. This is also not a ploy to buy my book. I will send you the manuscript if you want to read it for free. I write very clearly in this book, it's in sections, and the last section of the book is about the investigations and what we found on the investigations. And I start this section on the investigations with expressing my belief that Joliet prison is one of the few places, I can count them on 3 fingers, that I have found evidence of an infestation, a demonic infestation. A demonic infestation, according to the Catholic Exorcist Handbook, this is a place, not a person, that is possessed by demons, a demon or demons. And demons, as you already know from this series, run in packs. So it's infested by demons. And that is the absolute truth. People know that, all of these terrible murders and serial killers, rapists, thieves have been incarcerated there. What they don't realize is how many people have died at Joliet prison. Just between 1858 and 1905, there were over 600 people who died inside Joliet prison, inside the walls of Joliet prison. And this was not only victims of tuberculosis and other ailments, epidemics, but huge of those numbers were inmate on inmate crimes, shootings, dismemberments. There were so many, as there still are today in prison, so many suicides that occurred in Joliet prisons, hangings, especially in the solitary cell house. The first time Colleen went into the solitary cell house, she's a medium. She had a vision of body parts scattered across the staircase. We learned to find out that there was a prisoner that killed and dismembered another prisoner after they had an argument. There were many incidents, many nights when our tour groups were in the showers of the gymnasium, and everyone on the tour, or the majority of people on the tour, smelled blood. And we found out later on that there had been fatal stabbings in the showers at the prison. And this was something, these were things all over the place. I also learned later from a former guard that there was satanic worship that was going on in the prison. And this was over the course of many generations, going back into the 1920s, when there were reports of, those earlier kinds of like Aleister Crowley type stuff that was going on, sex magic and all that kind of Golden Dawn stuff, into the 1960s and all the stuff that was going on in that era with the hippie movement and going back to Age of Aquarius and all of that. Ritual activity that we saw starting to happen in the forest preserves and such, like Bachelor's Grove in the 60s and 70s. It even up until the last years the prison was in operation, with a lot of the prisoners that were involved in Santeria doing rituals in the prison, including in the solitary cell house. So we know that there were necromantic rituals that were going on in the prison over many decades. And this is not something to be ignored. This is not something to be laughed at. And this is not somewhere that you want to take people in where you are looking to talk to spirits. You are looking to talk to spirits using dowsing rods, using ghost or spirit boxes, using, all different, Ouija boards and other forms of equipment, using mediums and psychics to try and have these open lines of communication. We have talked about this so much in this series already. That's what this series is all about. You are not talking, you might think you're talking to, a poor prisoner that was stabbed to death in the showers, maybe an innocent man that was killed or hanged himself because he was wrongly convicted and wanted to get home to his wife and kids. These spirits might tell you that's who they are. This is not who they are. These are demons, these are demonic entities that are posing as disembodied human spirits to try and get you to do this very thing. Come into communication with them, come into relationships with them, do what people on our tour did, invite them to come home with them with terrible results. This is a place that is very, not only physically dangerous, it is very spiritually dangerous, decimating, harmful, evil. I mean, there are no words to tell you how spiritually decimating Joliet prison can be for a person. And I hope, it really brings me to say, I hope something happens, with, someone getting hurt or something, not, terribly, but I hope something happens to get this place closed up so these kinds of things can't happen anymore. I'm still barred from the prison. I tried a couple weeks ago. They're having like this big Blues Brothers festival where Danny Aykroyd and the Blues Brothers are going to play, and they're going to have like food tents and stuff like that. And they have a vendor area called Maxwell Street Market. I was like, great, I'm going to bring my book. I'm going to talk. People are going to come to the prison. I'm sure it'll be well attended. I can talk to people about the prison. I can warn them about the prison, tell them what I've discovered. And of course, no one called me back when I emailed about how to get a vendor table, because I guess I'm not even allowed to have a vendor table at this event, unlike anyone else. And I was not disappointed is not the word, sad, disturbed, terrified that my friend Colleen decided to go back and work with these guys on these investigations. And she told me, this is our place. I want to reclaim it. I want to reclaim my part in it. We made this place. I want it to be my place again. And I understand that. I understand all the work we did. I understand that we were the first ones. I understand that you want everyone to know that, and you want your piece of it, because we were the ones to discover all these stories. We were the ones to discover all this history. We were the ones to, pave the way, but it's not worth it. It is so not worth it, you guys. Not worth it, not worth it, not worth it. We were talking about your spirit. We're talking about your soul, your eternal, beautiful, precious soul. It is not worth it, to have that connection or to have whatever, you feel you're getting from this. It is not worth it. So as I said, I wrote about this in the book. I used to have the website joliethauntings.com, where I actually had parts of the book, just like at my Bachelor's Grove website, bachelorsgroveforever.com. I wanted to get the whole Joliet prison manuscript up on the website, but without having my company anymore, I just don't have the finances anymore to keep supporting a lot of different websites. So I made the difficult decision to take the Joliet site down. I might put it back up later. I don't know, maybe just to get this information out. But yeah, like I said, I hope people read the book. I hope you read all about my prognosis of the place, which is that there is a demonic infestation here, and it is a very spiritually dangerous place to be. And that's all pretty much I have to say about it. I'm going to leave the comments on right now. If the comments get nasty about me, like I said, I try not to say a lot of names. I know I said a couple of names. I know it's easy to figure out who people are. I didn't say anything defamatory. It's all, anything that I said is absolutely true. And if the comments get negative, I will take them down, but you can always email me at ursulabielski@sbcglobal.net if you want to talk to me about it later, or in private. If you have had your own experiences with Joliet prison, I'd be happy to talk to you about those, hear about those. So aside from that, thank you for being here. Joliet prison, like all the other places that I've written about, even now that I don't do investigations at places for fun, I do still help families and people, at their places of business that are having problems, to help them figure out if they have some sort of a human spirit that's there. And, what the remedy for that is to have masses said for that spirit to move on out of purgatory, or to see if that doesn't work, then it is something worse. It's something diabolical, and that has to be dealt with by a priest, not a deliverance minister, not a medium who's going to help this thing leave. It has to be dealt with by a Catholic priest. So I try to help people in those situations, but I don't, host public ghost tours anymore, public ghost hunts anymore. But I do still feel that there's a lot of value in going to places that are known to be haunted, because, we do learn about the history of these places, the tragedies that happened. We keep the history alive, and maybe we can find out the spirits that are still there, the suffering souls in purgatory that are at these places where perhaps they passed away or they committed sins. These are the two reasons why exorcists tell us that human spirits might remain in a place. So we can pray for them. We can have masses said for them. This is what we should be doing after we go to haunted places or experience hauntings. We should be starting to pray for these spirits. If it continues, then we should start, maybe if we're close to the person or close to the place, maybe helping whoever owns the place or head of the family find some spiritual help from a priest. So as for Joliet prison, read about it. I've written so much about it, the history of it, the inmates there, the deaths that have occurred there, the things that are happening there. You can find about the spirits in the book and start praying for them, like I have been doing. And, that's a really good thing to do. But it's fine to go to somewhere like, that's haunted, where there's ghost stories, but not someplace like this, where it's absolutely apparent that there is something diabolical there. You should avoid these places. You should want to avoid these places and not become involved in them, not get too close to them. Now, aside from that, I wanted to mention one more thing. I don't think things are going to go well at the prison. I think something bad is going to happen to somebody physically from the place being in the repair that it's in. I know that bad things are happening to people spiritually from being around the place, and emotionally. The other thing that I'm really afraid about is the old convict prison, and that's the original prison cemetery. And that's the original prison cemetery that's up on the bluff overlooking the prison. There's another prison, later prison, at Stateville out on Canton Farm Road that you can visit. There was an earlier version of that prison that's on prison property, as I found out when my husband and I almost got arrested last year trying to find it. There were no signs saying, it was prison property or no trespassing. There was no gate. So we just had looked at Google Maps and we saw there was a road that went back there that looked like farmland. So we drove back there. There was no one around. But when we got back there, the inmates were doing landscaping, and the officer in charge of them made a call, and we ended up being escorted out of there really quickly by a lot of officers. But it was all fine. And they said, just call the warden and you can come back, and he'll probably take you out, or have someone take you out to the cemetery. Just let him know what you're doing and get cleared beforehand. And I said, well, put up a sign, put up a no trespassing sign. They laughed and said, we will. But so there's the older prison back there, and then the Stateville prison that you can visit. But there, the original Joliet Prison Cemetery, old Joliet Cemetery, is up on the bluff, part of the old prison field. And there's a residential neighborhood up there. They call it Fairmont Hill, or they just call it the Hill, because it kind of goes up into a bluff in that part of Joliet. And it overlooks the prison. So the bodies would be taken when a prisoner died and there was no family member to claim them. They would be buried in the old prison cemetery. There's no markings there. All of the markers that were wood are all gone. I've done a lot of research on the cemetery, and there's a blog at chicagohauntings.com where my whole chapter about the prison cemetery, including all the burials that I've found there, are on that blog. It's very long and extensive. So you can see that all at chicagohauntings.com, or just Google like Old Joliet Prison Cemetery, Ursula Bielski. But I discovered that there's somewhere between 800 and 1,400 burials still up there on the bluff. And I talked to another researcher. It was interesting. I talked to another researcher in the county over there, Will County. And apparently another group had done a lot of research on the prison, and they had gone out there and they had been able to discern how many graves are there by the, you can tell, if you study abandoned cemeteries, you can tell when you're there that there's graves, just like in Lincoln Park in Chicago. Someone who's knowledgeable about abandoned graves and abandoned cemeteries can see that, parts of Lincoln Park still have burials. So I had gone up there, and it's very overgrown now, but you can still see on a map that it has boundaries, and it's, there has been some care given to it. But, this group apparently experienced the same kind of thing that we experienced with the local historical society, where a lot of research was done, a lot of background work was done, very exhausting work. And then credit was taken, or the information was taken, credit was given. And so apparently we weren't the only ones that experienced this kind of thing in Joliet. But again, that's neither here nor there. It's unfortunate, but it drives me nuts because, you see people in these, someone like me, I have a master's degree in history. I've been writing and researching history for, 30 years. And, I see people in these history jobs, this is their career, and they get paid good money for these jobs, and they don't even care. They just don't even care about it. And here I am at my dining room table, doing like 10 things to make ends meet. And it's just a shame. I don't know. Again, neither here nor there. But at any rate, thank you for being here tonight. I hope that you will take what I've told you to heart. Again, there's no hard feelings against anyone I've talked about. I'm worried about them. I look at the things that happen, the severing of relationships that have gone for so long, is what's happening, the money that's being made at these diabolical sites. And, it may sound like strong language, but that's what it is. And I really worry about my friend, and I just worry. Some of you may have known my really good friend, Jan Goldberg, who passed away just a few weeks ago. And we would text a lot, but we have really spoke on the phone. And she was my right-hand man at all the ghost cons. And if you knew Jan, you knew how funny she was. And, she had a really bad potty mouth too, which was so funny. She was like Don Rickles. She was so funny, as one friend of ours said in the eulogy at her funeral. And Jan, like I said, we rarely talked on the phone, but one morning at like 7 a.m., she texted me and said, "Can I call you right now?" And I said, "Sure." And I was like, "My God, what happened?" So she called me and she said, "What the bleep are bleep and bleep doing bleeping events at that bleeping prison for?" And I was like, "Oh God." And I knew what she was talking about. And I said, I know. And she's just like, what is wrong with people? And I said, I know, I don't know. I just don't know. But that was the last time. Jan always looked out for me, and she was such a good friend. She was, you always say someone has your back. Jan always had your back. She would never stab you in the back, or, do something behind your back, or, or do something like that, like work with somebody that had wronged you in any way. And it was just so funny because the last time she contacted me, it was it was that, it was about the prison, and it was about looking out for me, and it was looking out for these people, that were getting involved in this place. And so, and it was kind of appropriate. But Miss Jan, I love Jan, and I wish she could be here tonight. I guess she's here tonight on the show. I'm sure she is listening in. So at any rate, you can, like I said, you can read about the old prison cemetery, which I'm really afraid for, because that whole area, there's all this like preserve area behind the prison, and the prison quarries are there. They're filled with water now. This is where a lot of the prisoners would work. And then there's a big field. This was like where the prison farm was and everything. And then going up to the bluff there, that's where the cemetery was. And there's plans to make this into an extended, publicly accessible preserve area. And there's, I've seen the plans, I've seen the proposal, and there's no mention of the cemetery. And I know what's going to happen is either they're going to just pretend it's not there and just turn, just ignore it and just turn this into preserve area with no designation that this is what it is. This area is what it is, and that all of these inmates are still there. Or there will be some public attempt, announcement that the bodies are being moved. And I know what the bodies are like now. They were buried in pine caskets that were built by the prisoners. They were long gone by now, disintegrated in the soil, as are the bodies. There's probably bone fragments left after all these years, a century. And it's going to be the same thing that's happened at, Dunning here in Chicago, same thing that happened at St. Johannes at O'Hare Field in Chicago, where, instead of bringing archaeologists in to move the graves, they're going to bring steam shovels in to move them. And it's just going to be, for show, to make people think that they moved them. That's my guess what's going to happen. One of those two things. No mention of it, or, a public display of an effort being made with no real effort at all, because without an archaeological team being in there for probably years, it wouldn't be a proper removal of the graves. And that's just a fact. So I am really concerned about that. No one cares what I think. So I don't know. Anyway, that's all I got. That's all I got tonight. Thanks for being here. If you want to learn more about the prison cemetery, go to Chicago Hauntings to the blog, and you can find that, or just Google Joliet Prison Cemetery, Ursula Bielski, and you'll find that blog post. Very extensive. I am going to at some point get all of those names up on Find a Grave. I just haven't had time to do that, but I have found, hundreds of burials there that were heretofore not recorded. So there's no burial record, just like at Bachelor's Grove. So it's very difficult. This all came from newspaper articles and archives and things. So check that out. And then I will see you back here next Thursday for another episode of This Present Darkness on Ursula Bielski's World of the Supernatural. Thanks for being here. Have a great night.